Which is the harder game, chess or checkers? Most people will immediately say chess because for beginners, that's certainly the case. With different pieces in chess, the learning curve is much steeper. For those who don't know what they're doing, there are also more initial moves, 20 in chess and only 7 in checkers, so it's much easier to make a mistake in chess. But if we dive a little deeper, it turns out that checkers may in fact be the more challenging game. Let me show you why, with 7 of my best arguments, here on Legendary Tactics. Seven rules. One secret wish that I have is that a really evil movie villain is playing checkers rather than chess for their stage business. And by the end of the video, hopefully I will convince you that this would be a good choice. On the surface, chess is the more difficult game. The rules are more complex, the decision trees are more numerous, and long-term planning is critical. Anticipating your opponent's play in chess is part of the game. But just because rules are simpler in checkers doesn't mean that the strategic thinking is any easier at higher levels of play. Some may call it the game of peasants, but it is the game's very simplicity that paradoxically makes it harder to master. According to the 10-time world champion drafts player on the 100 square board, Alexei Tsichov, chess is easier than drafts because the amount of moves ahead that you need to plan. Whereas chess grandmasters plan 15 to 20 moves ahead, a checkers player must think forward up to 35 moves. And if you're Marion Tinsley, one of the greatest checkers players to ever live, he sees 64 moves into the future, like he did against Chinook, the AI that claims to have solved checkers. Incidentally, he beat Chinook in 1992 at the World Championships. 6. Options. When it comes to options in both games, Dr. Marion F. Tinsley says, chess is like looking across an ocean, and checkers is like looking down a well. Chess has a vast array of choices and outcomes, whereas checkers or drafts is more linear, but far, far deeper. Since all of the pieces in checkers have the same initial value and play the same role until kings are won, there are more possible combinations in the international version of the game, which is played on a 10x10 board with 100 squares and 20 pieces. But admittedly, we have to acknowledge that the 10x10 game is much more complex than the 8x8 game. Bear in mind that the way a piece moves changes depending on the board state. Number 5, differences. One key difference between these games is that capturing is compulsory in checkers and optional in chess. This means that you can take control of your opponent's decisions and set traps for them. While strategy and theories are widely available for chess, it's much harder to create theories for the incredibly large variation of outcomes in checkers. And interestingly, there are relatively few checkers grandmasters in the world compared with chess. Why do you think that is? Is it harder to master, or does nobody bother because they consider it a child's game? Checkers is certainly well known and intensely popular, and if you don't believe me, see for yourself. There are multiple apps on Google Play with 100 million plus downloads. Number 4, head-to-head. One way to determine whether checkers or chess players are the more formidable is to pit them head-to-head. Do checkers players beat chess players at their own game, or do chess players beat checkers experts? Unfortunately, we don't seem to have good data on this. Chess players tend to be very good at strategic thinking, whereas checkers players are better calculators. And chess's complexity comes from its differentiated pieces, whereas checkers' complexity comes from how the pieces interact with one another. A checker's ability to move longer distances changes based on how you move your pieces. So hopefully Magnus Carlsen will get bored of chess and head on over to checkers, so we'll finally know which one is more difficult to master. Number 3, appearances. Many would suggest that checkers is a much more monotonous game with limited options, but the best checkers players are intensely good at calculating the huge number of permutations that get the perfect move each and every time. According to the University of Alberta, checkers has been solved using the program Chinook. If black moves first, they're guaranteed a draw with perfect play. When white plays second, they can also guarantee a draw with perfect play. So this means that in order to win at checkers, neither player can make a single mistake. The same is not true in chess, so to master checkers, you must truly play a perfect game. Number 2, Endgame. As the chessboard empties, the number of options is also limited to the pieces that are left on the board. Checkers comes down to a battle of kings. This makes checkers endgame much more difficult for players. Knowing what patterns are presenting themselves and recognizing the weaknesses in your opponent's position is much more subtle in checkers. In chess, you only need to conquer the opposing king. In drafts, you need to capture all pieces. This makes the checkers endgame much more difficult than the chess endgame. Finally, winning. So how about it? Will the next Bond villain be playing checkers while they hatch their evil plot? Certainly, chess is more interesting, more prestigious, and has much more surface appeal, especially to newer players. But if you still think that chess is harder than checkers, stop playing against kids and take on a real checkers master. Then let me know if you've changed your mind. So which is harder in your opinion? Chess or checkers? Now I'll go ahead and brace myself to face all the chess player comments down below. This is Legendary Tactics.